Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
Alrighty, so this opening section is just a pretty standard kind of shoot 'em up section. Not a lot of optimizations here to be made. You can save time by trying to clear out the waves as fast as possible. As soon as you clear out one wave, the next one will start spawning in, so the quicker you can clear it out, the more time you'll save in this opening section. But we should see both of these runners coming out pretty even out of this shmup section.
Generally, I think even in previous races, most runners have come out of prologue, generally at about the same time.
It's actually been surprising. The RNG on angles has usually lined up for both runners from what I've seen. From all the runs I've commentated I've done, I think this is my 5th or 4th run now that I've commentated. There's only been one run where both players didn't get the same RNG. So yeah, prologues have been pretty even this tournament so far.
I believe there's a punches counter somewhere on the internet for this tournament.
11B, down. Our H0229 cancelers are ineffective.
But for the next couple of minutes, we're stuck in this flight unit, just trying to clear as many enemies as fast as possible.
Now, one minor thing you might have noticed is they are intentionally getting hit by the laser here. It's just a tiny little optimization to try and clear out the inventory of these small and medium pots you're given in the beginning, so that you can use your buffs faster when you get to the bosses in prologue. Not a huge time save, but again, while you're not really doing much else in this opening sequence, you might as well take this time save where you can get it. Actually, I'm just going to pull up the PB of both of these runners, just so we know if they are running on PB pace.
Sure.
Give me a quick second here.
So one thing worth mentioning here is sort of the camera angle changes between each of these sections. So we were in sort of a shoot 'em up style, top-down section before, where you were only locked to aiming forward. Now we're in sort of a twin stick style shooter, with the flight unit sort of changing modes. And we'll see these changes again throughout the run, whether it be in the flight unit or on foot. It's a very unique aspect to this game in that it's not afraid to put the player in sort of a situation that they may not be comfortable with and just rolling with it.
Okay, so the personal best times we've got, Datto is actually our 3rd seed player in the tournament. His personal best is an hour 28:01, so he was actually below that hour 30 mark that I was thinking of. Again, though, this is a race, so he will probably end up coming around that 1:30:01 mark.
And given the nature of the PC port, literally anything can happen. Some best things can happen, and the worst things can happen. That is definitely not speaking from experience.
Henny is our 19th seed, and he has a personal best time of an hour, 40 minutes, 47 seconds. So definitely looking to see if he'll PB here. I think he can definitely do it if he gets a smooth runoff. I know he's a capable runner. I believe in him. So we'll see Datto coming up now on one of the more annoying enemies in the game, and actually he did get the spin animation on the fidget spinner. Quite annoying to deal with, because if you're firing into it, that spin animation blocks all the bullets, and it kind of reduces your damage that you can get down on it. We'll see Datto coming into the first sort of third-person hack-and-slash session. This is what the game is mostly played in from this perspective. Follows the same sort of sequence as the shmups, where you want to clear out the waves as fast as possible to get the next spawn in as fast as possible.
Although it is worth mentioning, the move that we're constantly doing throughout all of this combat is rather simplistic. It's just a dash plus a heavy input, and the reason why that works so effectively is because when you have a short sword in your heavy slot and you do that input combination of a dash plus a heavy attack right after, 2B's sword actually deals about 4.5 to 5 times damage on a single tick of damage, which is ridiculous for some of these boss fights. And we'll see how that sort of damage multiplies throughout the progression of the run as well, adding things on top of what we already know in Prologue.
So Datto getting out of Mark's 1 here. He's going to go on to the first set of, vertical movement skips. This is called crane skip. Not too difficult, but you'll see him utilizing 2B's aerials to give himself a lot of aerial momentum.
2B? Ma'am?
Sort of an unintentional skip in the game, not quite out of bounds since you can run back towards it and grab items, but
just some of the pathing is interesting because when I first learned how to do high jump tech like we do in the run here, it really sort of boggled my mind and opened up new possibilities of like where the player can go in this game. It was really interesting.
And we're definitely going to see the sort of height of what's possible with that movement, because coming up after the silo that Datto's on, we have one of our highest skips, high jump skips in the game, called bridge skip. We'll see him moving on to that right now. Quite the daunting skip for new runners, and you see Datto screwing up a couple times. Couple precise timing windows.
A little bit of difficulty there. Nice.
I think he will get it there. Very nice.
But the idea behind that skip in particular is to maximize the amount of height you get per attack animation. So the precise timing on that is incredibly tough, and especially for newer runners, it's very difficult to learn the timings for. And especially to boot, Prologue has some of the most advanced tech all within a very small amount of time. When it looks like Datto's having some trouble in the wall there. But Prologue is definitely one of the more harder sections of the run because everything's so compressed and so optimized. And it looks like Bridge is giving Henny some trouble.
I know.
And somebody in the chat is bringing up the PC port and the game crashing. As people who speedrun this game, I'm pretty sure we can all relate to it.
Oh yeah.
Even in this tournament yesterday, we witnessed Shabu crashing his game right as he was about to set a checkpoint and getting set back 20 minutes.
It's pretty rough. The way we alleviate that as PC players is by using the community mod FAR, made by Keldayan and a group of other players as well. The work that they've put towards that community mod is astounding and enormously appreciated by the community.
It definitely helps fix a lot of the issues with the PC port, although it isn't perfect. Crashes do still happen, but it's definitely a huge step up.
It's just unfortunate that Platinum and Square Enix didn't really give too much, let's say, effort towards the PC port.
So we're going to see Datto coming up now on Marks 2. Plays very similar to Marks 1, just there's two of them, and we're just going to see if he's going to do some damage glitching. Yep. Gets hit by Marks, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue here.
You might need to buff up here.
You might have to buff up to get the one cycle. Yep.
Yeah, unfortunate. You can actually make it so that way, as Marks 2 passes across that bridge, you can throw 2 sets of damage glitches at specific timings when Marks is passing by 2B, and instead of having to take the menu time to throw on a melee attack up, he can just do the damage glitches right at the very end and still save some time. Unfortunately, he had to buff up.
So the couple of attempts at bridge skip have set Henny back a little bit. Not terribly, I'd say probably about 20 to 25 seconds, and that could easily be equalized with Angle's RNG, if we want to explain that. So Angle's RNG, you'll see right now on Datto's screen, he is throwing out sort of a punch pattern. Currently, it doesn't matter, and actually you kind of want punches here so you can get a little bit of damage down on Angles. But ideally, after the cutscene where 9S flies in, you do not want to get punches. It is the slowest option, and it will lose you about 25 seconds out of prologue. Unavoidable. So ideally, you're hoping for one of the projectile patterns, which will be your optimal option.
It's a bit of an inverse correlation there. In this first section, you're wanting punches so you can deal damage to the boss and threshold him, but for the other section, you actually don't want punches.
So we'll see Henny now just starting Angles, Datto getting the cutscene. Let's see what he gets.
Punches!
Unfortunately, he gets punches.
Oh my god.
So good section here for Henny to equalize now. That could have just completely cleared it up. Unfortunately, if Henny gets punches too, we're back at square zero. Always tragic to see punches in a race, because a lot of the time runners will just reset on punches. It's early enough in the run that it's not a huge deal to reset, although a mild annoyance.
Although it is worth noting there, Datto is attacking Angles as he's punching the ground, and that's a little bit of a time loss because every time 2B damages an enemy, their attack animation is slowed just by a very minuscule amount. So that punch animation actually occupied more time than he would have wanted.
Alright, Henny about to hit the cutscene. Should be right about in the middle of this attack here. I don't have the music cue, so I can't tell. There we go. Let's see what he gets. And Henny gets it. Very nice. So you see now Datto actually opting to just kind of... He's in a slightly out of bounds area. This next section of Angles is completely on a timer, so you just have to wait for him to rip up the bridge and throw out 2 attacks. Doesn't take any additional damage here, so you pretty much just get to sit by for free. And yeah, Henny now only one swing behind. So he's probably about 10 seconds behind Datto now after that.
Yeah, Datto definitely lost a good amount of time from getting punches there.
So now we're going to see another little bit of movement tech coming out here from Datto. When we do high jump tech, you do a thing called a lift, which is jumping and then using a heavy attack will cause you to lift into the air. You can actually get a double lift by running into a slanted surface, and when you go to do the lift, your feet will touch into the ground.
It looks like he opted not for the double lift there. Surprisingly, you can still make that jump with a very well-timed regular lift and high jump. More akin to actually the glitchless tech that we would use to climb that staircase there. I'm actually quite surprised he even made the height.
Another thing to note.
You can see on Henny's screen there, attempting the double lift and making it.
Datto had a very clean ninjas at the top of Angles here. And that's what we'll see Henny going into right now. We call them ninjas because they're very annoying for dodging out of the way of the laser. Lose you a little bit of time if you're not careful with it.
I found a weakness in the target. Hacking in to provide support.
So for Datto right now, he's just waiting for dialogue to pass. Both runners relatively close to each other at this point in the run.
Control on the enemy's upper arm. Use your pod. Should be able to.
Oh, and it looks like Datto's going to get a little bit of bad RNG there, and he got missiles to boot. So missiles is a relatively long attack that, especially in this phase, is a little bit of a time loss. You can get it so that way the dialogue and Angle's attacks line up perfectly, so that way you lose no time when transitioning between dialogue and phase change. And in typical Platinum's over-the-top boss killing, we're just gonna kill Engels with his own arm.
The funny thing that we can do too is we can also just reset the attack cooldown and just swing at him gung-ho if you evade after every heavy attack, leading to a pretty quick Engels kill. So 15:26 prologue coming out from Datto. Very respectable. A little bit slower than probably what he has on his PB, but still a very respectable PB time.
Nothing.
Henny's going to be coming up on about a 16-minute prologue, about 25 seconds behind. Now we're going to see Datto going into the first boss of the game, the menuing section in Bunker. Second boss of the game, my bad. These menus can just be quite annoying for timing them if you're not experienced with the run. Getting all the sliders to go at the right time and then setting yourself destruct.
Menu boss is the hardest boss in this game.
Morning. Oh.
No.
Huh?
There-
Oh, wait. You need to be near an access
So now
point
for this
to
next
save the
section of the
data.
game,
You
it's
can
just
see
a bunch of
access points on
dialogue
the Flames
mashing and
map.
a little bit.
Be sure to save
No more
wisely.
menuing after this for Datto at least. Just a little bit more mashing and then we'll be back in the flight units and doing another shmup. And we'll see.
Oh no, and it looks like the elevator's giving Datto a little bit of a hard time there.
Better head for the hangar.
Not a particularly hard movement tech in comparison to a bridge skip, but it happens.
Mass produce these things yet.
It's okay, we're allowed to spaghetti sometimes.
I don't know how much of the runs you watched yesterday. I had some very big spaghetti on my run.
Hey, 2B, why do you think they sent a combat
I
model
may or
like
may
you
not
for
have went to
recon
buy
testing?
in
All
Pascal's
along,
village
Intel
and not
scanner
even
mobs
talk to
are built for
Pascal
that kind
and
of
ran all the way to
Orders?
commercial
Oh
complex.
yeah, I remember that.
Alright.
Yeah. So I'm not I'm not excused from this spaghetti.
So now that Datto is back in the flight unit, he's just going to kill all these enemies in front of him as fast as he can.
Now, one thing to note here, too, after you finish the prologue, it takes away all of your items except the short sword, so you have no potions here. Ideally, you just don't want to get hit, because then you'll have to worry about it for the next section of the game, because we don't buy for another 10 or 12 minutes here. It's not the time you want to be running around in critical HP. Thankfully, there is a health pot that you can grab in the resistance camp that doesn't lose you any time as you're waiting for dialogue anyways.
Yeah, but 6, don't you want to live on the edge?
I lived on the edge. I almost died here. I had to go get that pot. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Datto, not being as incompetent as I, he has gotten through this section with barely getting hit, and we'll see him start to move on to the destroyed city section. City ruins. Henny not trailing too far behind in the second shmup. Now, one thing you'll see Datto just did, cutscenes in this game, when you approach them, you lose control of the character and then you slowly walk up to the cutscene before the cutscene actually cuts in. Well, you can counteract this by doing a number of movement options into them. As long as you're moving through, you can do a pod launch, you can do a heavy swing, but it just saves a couple of seconds. It's a speed run, we're trying to save wherever you can.
That's pretty weird.
You'll see another one coming up here as he enters the resistance camp. And again here, Datto just going to be doing a lot of menuing
So this is
and
the
picking up
resistance
the
camp,
side
huh? We
quests,
should probably go talk
which
to their
are
leader
actually main
first.
quests because you can't really progress through the storyline without them.
Target location data obtained. Marking on map.
So once we have these quests, it's pretty much a beeline to the quest area, and it's just standard pickups. One of them, you just have to go pick up 4 parts for the trader, and then the other, you go kill a couple stubbies and pick up a couple parts to upgrade your sword to level 2.
So
So
one
you-
thing pointing out here, just in terms of the player's movement,
It's fine.
you can notice that they're dashing and chaining a punch directly after they dash, and you'll see some of the movement change a little bit throughout the run as well. In Prologue, we saw that the runners were chaining dashes after one another, and now since we have the Bare Fist active in our light slot, it's a little bit faster to be dashing and punching directly afterwards. And again, once we level up our sword, we'll see our movement option change again when using a faster sword. Datto having a little bit trouble reading where those enemies are going to drop their items. Those enemies can be very trolly, and sometimes they just drop the wrong items.
These chores are a real pain in the butt, huh?
However, with a keen eye, you can know which enemies to kill and where exactly those items will be spawning.
Yeah, yeah.
That'll be another interesting thing to note is if any of the players are going to, or any of the runners are going to go for Virtuous Contract 3. We've seen it a couple times this run. Datto might. I wouldn't put it past Henny to do it either.
I think Henny has more experience with it. He definitely has more experience than myself. I've opted to really not go for it, but I'm not too sure on what Datto's strategy would be for it.
We'll definitely see because it's to the more if you're more experienced with the Virtuous Contract 2, stepping it up to Virtuous Contract 3 actually changes up a lot of the out-of-bounds clips and setups, making them a lot harder to do. We're still working out the proper lineups for them, and we've seen a couple times this tournament runners upgrading to Virtuous Contract 3 and getting stuck on one skip in particular.
That's
It'll
bound
definitely
to
be
happen.
interesting to note.
Upgrading our sword to level 3 generally has been known to the community, but the difficulty in some of the lineups and precise clips that we do at the later parts of the run have sort of mitigated that, but more recently people have been putting more interest in upgrading the sword to level 3. Mostly because that base damage increase is enormous. It's like a 55% base damage increase. So it just melts through any boss that we come across.
Now, another interesting thing to note here, since we were talking about previous runs of Nier Automata and how the route has changed, this opening section of the game has changed a lot, and we're going to see Datto starting out with one of the major changes by grabbing this transporter here and clipping out
Nice.
the wall.
Map data,
Very
huh?
swaggy, heavy
It's
hold
hard to get
there,
an
coming right out of the transporter menu.
Satellite resolution isn't so hot. Hopefully they deploy some new
So,
satellites.
as you're going to see a lot in this run, walls are merely suggestions, as we say a lot, and there we have a lot of options to pretty much any corner in the game you can clip out of. And we're going to see Datto coming up on another clip here. This is the barricade skip. Usually you would have to talk to Jackass over behind, and she would blow up the barricade. There's a lot of dialogue. Instead, we just use the barricade that's, for some reason, placed in front of the barricade to clip out behind the barricade and continue through to the desert without having to wait through all that dialogue.
It is worth noting as well that out of bounds that Datto just scaled there is rather tight. It's the lip of where that out of bounds finally ends on solid floor is very, very tight. So the players kind of have to skirt around the path in order to remain out of bounds. And fortunately, Datto got the trigger that he needed and was able to remain out of bounds. It's a little bit faster than actually having to hit the cutscene that would otherwise be in your way.
Careful. We've got enemies approaching.
Datto now just finishing up grabbing Pod C. He's going to work his way over towards the desert housing complex now. Pod C is quite important in our run, mainly just because of having a second pod program. It comes in handy later in the run for clearing out bosses such as Engel or Corazon Grun. It helps speed those up into nice little one cycles, as well as just having backup for pod slow-mo. We can explain that in a bit, though.
Oh, Stupid Rock giving Datto a little bit of an interesting thing. I don't think he tried to plunge through to the rock. But again, on Henny's screen, you could see the out of bounds being done again for Desert Barricade.
Henny opting to reclip back into bounds. A lot more of a safer strat because you don't have to worry about falling and voiding out of bounds. But you will have to go through the cutscene here. It does lose you about 4 seconds. So we're now seeing Datto come up on the housing complex skips. Normally in the run, you would have to go over to the left of where Datto is and run through all the apartments in the desert and chase after this one stubby. A lot of cutscenes, a lot of sort of roundabout route. So instead we clip into the apartment building here and just beeline it right for Adam Pit by going completely out of bounds. See Datto hitting part 2 of the skip very well. And now in this last part, he's just going to try and clip out and hit a trigger in the tunnel that we normally walk through, and then fall towards Adam Pit and hit the trigger on the platform.
Oh, and a little bit of an interesting timing there. It looks like he messed up his jump. It's also worth pointing out that Datto switched his weapons at this point, and it looks like he's opting for the Voidless strat. There is, or a Void strat. There is a faster strategy there where you get the trigger and you land on that platform that Datto hit to trigger this section, all in one motion. Although it is a little safer to void out after getting the trigger and hopping down onto the platform. And he's going for Stupid Rock and going for a little bit of a hop there, but that's still relatively okay. It looked like the machine there was giving him a little bit of an issue, but that's to be expected. That machine is always very trolly.
So now we have Datto down in Adam Pit. Essentially, you're just waiting for Adam to spawn, so you want to clear out the pretty much as many stubbies as you can. Here, we're trying to grind experience for later in the run to hit level 20, as well as grind plug-in chips. The more you can kill the stubbies here, the higher chance you have of getting a drop for something like a crit chip, which can help speed up your run later.
And generally, more enemy kills gives more XP, gives a higher level. This is an RPG after all.
So we'll see Datto going into Adam fight. Probably one of the harder fights in the game, just due to all of his attacks that he throws out and just his multiple phases. See if he gets the phase skip here. If you can get Adam past a certain damage threshold, yeah, it looks like he did it. You can actually skip one of the phases where Adam evolves. And then you're going to see him here charge up a double laser and do enough damage to skip another phase, another 2 phases on Adam. So very clean fight so far.
And a very clean desert housing skip on Henny's part as well.
Come on, through that hole.
So now we're going to see the part that we talked about earlier with both runners grabbing the desert transporter. That's part of a skip now that we do towards this section of the Desert Escape. Essentially, by grabbing the transporter earlier, we can clip out of bounds coming up here and save our game outside of the dialogue trigger. So we save ourselves both the dialogue time and the running time to get back to the transporter. And since we're playing in loadless, that sort of save is very impactful.
I really like this clip because it's just really swag. As a part of the older routing where we didn't do this skip, it was still relatively known that you could clip through this box. But what's unique about this is that we clip through the box, but also dash quickly to the left, and that actually takes us out of bounds into this tiny little area that Datto's in now.
All right, so very, very clean run coming out from Datto. No major, even minor mistakes really, besides a couple of attempts at bridge skip that we've seen. Definitely running at a good pace. Henny now starting up on Adam.
Oh, and Adam's not really taunted there. He's going to have a little bit of a difficult time trying to get the sword dodge skip.
Operator to 9S.
Fortunately, it looks like
I forget how much time that loses. I believe that's about a 10-second time loss getting that cutscene that Henny just hit.
2B, 9S. We've lost contact with several Yorha units that were.
But if the runner is fast enough in taunting Adam, buffing up, and getting him down to a damage threshold in time, then that cutscene is skippable, as we saw with Datto's Adam pit.
Transmission.
I heard something about that back at the Resistance camp.
So now that Datto's moving on to amusement park, I'm curious what he's going to do with roller coaster. I don't believe he has put much practice into auto-scroller coaster skip, but I guess we'll have to find out.
Just like androids, right?
Right.
But we androids were modeled after.
I'm, of course, alluding to a skip that involves riding the roller coaster, but not actually being on the roller coaster itself. We'll see that in a little bit if either of the runners attempt it, but I believe a couple other racers in other matchups have also attempted that skip.
I wouldn't be too surprised to see it come out from either of them. I don't know. I haven't watched much of Datto's run, so I'm not sure if he's practiced it, but I think Henny's played around with it a little. I don't know if he's played around with it to be comfortable enough to throw it in a race.
I know Datto's played around with it, but I'm not too certain on how confident he feels in this sort of setting.
So the reason we're pretty excited to see this sort of skip is it is fairly new tech to the run. I want to say it's within 2 weeks old. So that's why you'll see a lot of runners opting not to do it.
Oh, and it looks like he's opting for it. He's climbing the building there to get onto the tracks while out of bounds, which surprisingly the tracks are still solid. He's going to hit a trigger there to still progress. That one in sort of that corner there is required. He's going to call the coaster, hop on it, and it looks like he's too...
Oh, he got it off.
It looked like he was too high there, and it was actually going to get stuck on the coaster, but he still managed to clip out there. So what he's going to do, there's a trigger that's required on the very top of that staircase there, and he's also able to clip out of that staircase and still get off the coaster. In all, I think it's a little bit of a time loss to actually perform this, but overall, if Datto ends up getting a spear during this time, he might actually come out ahead if he's fast enough with a technique known as spear dashing.
The spear is one of the two options you can go for here. The other, a little bit closer, safer option would be to kill the tank for the bonus levels, if you want to take it that way. That way you can, guarantee, I think it's 400 more experience in the run, and you might be able to opt out of something like you might be able to opt for a Mooks clip later in the run and not have to worry about getting the level 20 as desperately. There we go. So Datto does get the spear, and he's going to be starting Beauvoir.
It's honestly the silliest trick ever, because once the roller coaster reaches the point on the track that it's supposed to be releasing the player and putting them down into the boss arena,
What the hell?
the coaster doesn't really care where the player is actually situated. They just lift up into the air and hop back down into the boss arena.
Now this
Now that
is
Datto's
definitely
off.
one of my favorite bosses in the game. And
Oh yeah.
we're gonna see him run through here. Essentially, he did the first stage exactly as you need to. You just essentially damage glitch her to her threshold and then walk yourself back towards the stage. She'll do her spinning attack back towards the stage, and then that reduces the time before she jumps on the stage. Pretty optimal there from Datto.
If we take hacking damage, it'll affect our bodies as well.
And you can see on Henny's screen going for the same Let's Play skip to get out of bounds in the amusement park, but I don't quite know if he's going to go for the roller coaster skip. It doesn't look like it, so he's going to opt for the safer strategy of staying on foot on the ground and riding the roller coaster as if by normal means. It's a very quick killing by Datto in Beauvoir's bodies section.
Try to hack it back. Keep it busy.
You got it.
Unfortunately, Beauvoir's boss mechanics really get sort of overlooked when dealing literally all the damage in the world. But she is a very enjoyable boss, casually.
We will see Datto setting up for something later in the run here. He's going to self-destruct at the end of Beauvoir to leave himself at low HP.
Oh,
This comes into effect because the next part of the run is we run to Pascal's village, and we get a quest from Pascal to deliver a couple of parts over to the Resistance camp. Then you go to the Resistance camp, get a couple more parts from them, and bring that back to Pascal. The optimal way we can do this is by leaving ourselves at low enough HP that when we go back to the Resistance camp, we bait an animal, ride it to the Resistance camp, pick up the quest, and then go to the animal and get the animal to kill us. If we grabbed the save back in Pascal's village, we'll warp back to there. Because currently we don't have transporters unlocked yet, so this is the next best method.
We'll see that in a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit down the run. It's that's probably about the next 5 minutes of the run.
So you can see Henny going into the Beauvoir fight.
So why don't the machines?
Oh, and it looks like she's getting away from his sword there, but he still got the damage threshold in time. Again, I think one thing to point out. Oh, and it looks like Datto forgot to equip the spear. For that stretch of side-scroller there, it's actually quite easy to have equipped the spear into your light slot and perform what I had alluded to earlier, a technique known as spear dashing. Because you're in a 2D section, it's very easy to just do the maneuver because you don't really have to aim the character. However, it's really going to come down as to where Datto uses this his spear in order to make up some of that time that he lost from getting the spear. It is a relatively new technique that runners have yet to really flesh out and incorporate, but overall, if you do it optimally, it is actually faster.
2B here. What's wrong?
Oh no, looks like Data's going for a boar bait here. This will be interesting. I hope he memes out, and he is.
There we go. We got a cowboy. So it is actually faster to do what Datto's doing. If you do manage to bait a boar and you get them sprinting, it is actually faster to jump with them. It's just really funny to watch.
I don't think I can stand spending one more day.
The memes.
You leaving would be bad for
Oh
you.
no, and it looks like Henny just got hacked right in Beauvoir's death throes. That's going to cause him to not have the ability to self-destruct in Bovor's final phase there. He's going to have to move that elsewhere in the section. A little bit of confusion there on Datto's part. I don't know what happened canceling that door. But what we were alluding to earlier, where you want to be on 1 HP for this section, is that way the boar or animal can easily kill the player. And because having saved in Pascal's village, we respawn in Pascal's village, leave our body behind at Resistance Camp, and progress with the quest.
Now, unfortunately, because Henny did miss the self-destruct at the end of Beauvoir, he is going to have to choose another time to self-destruct somewhere in here. He'll probably do it before one of the talking cutscenes, I would have to guess. Because after you self-destruct, you have a period where you walk super slow and you can't interact with anything for about 5 seconds, I want to say.
Oh, and one thing to actually bring up, Deoxy more in chat is saying that Datto's spear dashing isn't exactly the greatest, but it looks like Datto's having some confidence here. He's trying the spear dashing.
2B, Command is deploying new flight units for us. They just set the coordinates, so let's get going.
On.
One thing to point out actually when spear dashing here is that because most of it is just with a neutral forward joystick, the most common thing that actually takes the player off of the path that they're wanting to take is auto lock on. That 2B, when an enemy or an animal gets close to her, she tends to auto lock on to that target. And especially when spear dashing, if you're looking at any target within range, 2B will just auto lock on and take you off the beeline. And with spear dashing being as fast as it is, that can easily take a good second or so, or more, from your movement.
This is actually very interesting to watch because I haven't explored the possibilities of auto roller scroller skip myself.
Oh, it is
So
really silly.
I haven't seen the spear dashing before. It looks
For those
very
of you
funny,
who are
but
familiar with spear dashing, you'll know in NG Plus, different category than what the runners today are running, spear dashing is used in conjunction with a lot of the other faster movement tech as well.
Unfortunately, Datto not getting the setup for angle skip, so he's going to go for backup here. He's going to do those double lifts we talked about earlier to get over this invisible wall.
Oh, and it looks like Henny's also memeing out on the boar. Poggers.
The skies are packed with anti-air weapons. Make sure to approach at low altitude.
But funny enough, in Datto's perspective, that first angles fight actually is not required. So hopping over the invisible wall that the game puts in front of you is merely a suggestion.
And it's funny, I'm going to go back to the point that I brought up earlier, that there's almost so many perfect little skips that we do that it almost seems like they were intentional in a way. I think City Angles encapsulates that perfectly, because that wall of rocks that you saw him try to skip over, there's a little window at the top. And because the devs weren't expecting players really to go that way, they didn't make it very tall. So you can literally just double jump over it.
Intentional developer oversights.
Exactly.
QA'd, by the way. Omega LOL.
And if that wasn't enough, then you can immediately go into the next City Angles. And if he has the right hitbox, you can just nuzzle yourself right in between his shoulder and his arm, and he'll eat the entire 2 pod programs and be 2-shot.
So looking at Henny's perspective there, it looked like he didn't bother self-destructing at all, and he lost a little bit of time there because generally, as we saw, the animal doesn't hit you for 100% of its damage outright. So it still takes a good number of hits for the animal to actually kill you.
And even more annoying so is sometimes the animal won't even try to kill you, it'll just start running away, in which
or it'll attack 9S.
Yeah, exactly, that's even worse. Or better, depending if you're a 9S fan or not.
I don't know. There's nothing like it in the database.
So Datto's made his way into the next fight, which is negotiations, fighting the enemies lovingly named Alan and Steve.
My name is Adam. The aliens you seek are no longer here. They were wiped out centuries ago. By us. The machines.
Wiped out?
And who knows? Perhaps we'll wipe out the androids.
When it looks like Henny's opting for a little bit of a different strategy that's going to save him sometime later on in this run. He's going to pick up that transporter in the city ruins by the Nier Tower, and he's going to be using that transporter to get outside of Pascal's village later on in the run to avoid a cutscene that's caused by a side quest. But we saw some very nice combat from Datto, effectively taking out Eve there. So now that he's done with the fight and he has the XP, he's going to counterattack and do a high jump combo to once again get over the arena's wall. So now that he's outside of the arena, he's free to do whatever he wants, so long as he doesn't leave the tunnel.
Assist you with what?
It's simple. We need you to locate the humans on the moon.
Now, the couple nice things about going for this, again, because you're not really doing anything else in negotiations. You can clear out the tunnel, you can go get all the drops. I think we saw earlier in the tournament, I can't remember which runner it was, somebody got a crit chip out of this tunnel. And the other thing, yeah, somebody got a crit chip. I can't remember who it was, though, for the life of me. I want to say it was Fudge. It was definitely Fudge.
The same way we destroyed these.
But and then you also clear out the tunnel, which opens it up for dash swinging out without having to worry about auto swinging into enemies.
Oh no, and it looks like Henny's having a little bit of difficulty there on city angles.
Be interesting to see if he just opts to kill it at this point. Yeah, it looks like he's gonna go for that. It can be a little bit difficult to get the backup strat if you're too late and Angle starts throwing punches at you. I've had more than enough of my fair share of getting the backup skip and then having Angles punch me off the bridge right out of the air. So Henny's just gonna play it safe.
Feeling.
So now here we've unlocked transporters in the run. We'll be using those for a lot of just transportation between places in the rest of the run. Nothing else is more efficient than that. And yeah, we'll see him. He's going to be going to the bunker, doing a little bit more dialogue. We'll see if he goes for the dialogue skip up at the top here. I imagine he will. So by talking to 9S here and then walking through, you can actually just trigger the dialogue to skip. I think it'll save him like 3 or 4 seconds, maybe.
I forget exactly how much time that dialogue skip saves, but it is worth doing.
Henny getting the good spot for the Engels kill. We'll be moving on to negotiations now, so still not too far behind. Just 1 negotiations behind, but again, anything can happen in a Nier Automata race. Soft locks can be anywhere, so Henny could make this time right back up.
So Datto's taking the time to go shopping again. He's going to sell some items from his inventory to get enough cash to... and also sell some of the HUD elements in his chipset, so that way he can make more space for damage chips. He's also going to opt for defensive buffs as well, in addition to offensive buffs and some recoveries. And it looks like he'll be equipping his chips in a little bit. Datto, I believe, is one of the only runners that I'm aware of, at least towards the top of the leaderboard, who still hits this side quest cutscene.
Say,
I believe it's only like a 4-second time loss or so, but there is a way of getting over that cutscene,
yeah, but
and whether it be through a high jump combo or even doing the strategy that Henny has set up,
sometimes, huh?
where
We don't get to choose our
you can just
assignments.
transport
And
to
usually
the other
I'm
side of
taking
the
your
city
epiphany to
ruins
check. You're hard
and
to be emotional, remember?
skip the
Some
cutscene
of us are
entirely.
better at that than
So we're
others.
seeing some more spear dashing out of Datto here.
This must be the commercial structure Pascal was talking about. The records say it was once a facility known as a shopping center.
It looks like he's canceling his spear dashing a little too early, but that might just be stream lag. I'm not too certain.
And we're gonna see Datto doing another dialogue skip here. This one I believe saves a bit more time than the last. It's a little bit longer of a dialogue.
Who the heck is the Forest King?
You're getting distracted.
Check this guy. He's just running away.
It's a pretty quick 4 robots. He's probably going to equip his chips somewhere up here now, I would imagine.
I know some people equip them a little bit
Looks
later.
like the forest is just ahead.
It's a very nice combat coming out of Henny on Eve. He's going to... It looks like he's setting up to escape the arena here. Sometimes Eve is just really trolly in what attacks he actually chooses. And he's out of the arena. Nice. It is worth mentioning the really wonky camera angle that this Out of Bounds gives us, because the camera is locked to this 2D side-scroller thing in the circular sort of arena shape. Once we get out of bounds and onto that bridge there, it sort of tears the arena apart in terms of how the camera sees it.
Now another interesting thing to note is that Datto did get crit chips. No +2s, but he did get 2
Don't listen to what they're
+1s.
saying, 2B.
That's a good amount of damage out of that.
How are we supposed to reach that castle?
Of course, crit chips unlock the ability to hit a critical attack, or a critical hit, rather. That's, I believe, I forget how much of a multiplier it is exactly, but every time a crit hits, it's a significant damage increase, and ideally we would want to be hitting crits as often as possible. Unfortunately, it's just RNG as to where and when they hit. Datto opting for a little bit of an older strategy there, using the slippiness of the hill to hop into a drown area. So that way he tricks the game into thinking that he was initially in the castle area. So the game replaces him on the drawbridge. And he's again going out of bounds, out of the castle courtyard.
And now this skip, very simple but very nice. The castle is a 4-story building, and it is mapped like a labyrinth. So you have to run up and down it, back and forth through it, and it takes a lot of time. I want to say about 1.5 minutes. So getting that skip, although it is pretty simple, it's a very nice skip to have.
It was definitely one of my first enjoyable skips in this game when learning. I really like the intricacies of the castle, so being able to skip all of that really felt satisfying when I was learning.
2B, that's an android. A Yorha-type android.
Now we're seeing Datto come up on A2.
Wanted by Yorha.
Quite the slippery boss fight. She can run away from you,
Let's go.
throws out attacks pretty quickly. So we'll see how Datto handles this.
A2 can definitely slip through your fingers if you're not careful when trying to damage her. Oh, but it looks like she's giving him some good attacks there.
But she
deserted us.
Nice, a very fast fight overall, but it looks like A2's animations are being a little silly there.
So now normally at this section in the game, A2 goes to the window, you jump out and follow. Instead, we're going to go over to the other end, and you see Datto doing a high couple aerial techs to get over an invisible trigger there that would normally turn you around back in the direction of the window. And he's going back to the transporter, back to Pascal's village, skipping about 40 seconds of dialogue doing so. Henny now just starting up his buys. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if he does his equips here or if he'll do it around 4 robots as well. It'll be interesting to see what he got for chips from Adam Pitt as well.
Yeah, and it is also worth pointing out that both runners did opt to buy defense buffs at this point. And here you could see Henny going into the transporter and transporting to the Nier Tower transporter, so that way that skips the cutscene that he would otherwise have to hit when leaving Pascal's village.
Why did you ask Pascal about A2?
Alright, so now we're on to head towards Flooded City. You're going to see Datto go over to this corner of the Resistance camp to cancel some dialogue.
Machines are the enemy. Don't
And
forget.
he'll talk to an enemy, pick up her quest, and then you're going to see him glitch out of the Resistance camp here. He's going to do 2 plunges, following up here, 1 to hit the trigger that you would normally get walking into Flooded City. After that, he'll void out, so you're seeing him do that now. You glide under this building, do a pod spin, and jump into the cutscene.
Still very clean.
And now you'll see him, he's going to do a plunge into another drown zone. The drown zone thinks he was actually in Flooded City, so now he's going to skip all the walk over to Flooded. Not the most difficult skip to pull off, but very satisfying.
Yeah, but come on, 2B. It still feels good.
Ooh, Henny only having the space enough to equip resilience and a critical up chip. I believe we didn't touch on resilience, but one of the chips that we do equip in that section that both runners have access to is a chip known as resilience, and that basically makes it so that way 2B cannot stagger so long as her HP is above a certain threshold. Because we only buy the lowest level resilience, that percentage I believe is 80% health. So long as 2B is at full HP, she cannot be staggered. However, she can still be hit.
This does make keeping up and maintaining your damage glitches a lot easier. On top of having the iframes from your damage glitch, you can let one quick attack slip through and not have to worry about chaining it as long as you stay up topped on your health pots. And
it becomes more of an issue with when players start to incorporate techniques like double damage glitch and slow-mo, because when you slow-mo, it's impossible to quick menu down to your recoveries and quickly heal up.
Yep, and thankfully both runners, are both using defensive buffs. It is seen as a time loss, but when you get to later stages in the game and you have enemies taunted, a lot of the end bosses will just straight two-shot you, so you really have to stay on top of your pots and trying to throw in those double damage glitches with slow-mos where you actually can't heal. You start to play a little bit more of a risky game.
Henny also opting for the skip known as Mario Kart skip that tricks the castle into thinking that you were actually in the castle. There's also another version of that same technique that avoids that slippery hill entirely and does a relatively complex long jump. But it's all a matter of practice when it comes down to it. All of these skips are technically not required. You can, as a runner, progress through the speedrun without having done any of these clips or tricks and would still be able to complete the run.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting, unique thing about this speedrun too. I kept saying this in my commentaries, and myself included, there's a lot of new runners in this tournament, and from the new runners that I've talked to and raced against, we've all taken pretty different strategies to learning this run. Some have fundamentally gone and, you know, mastered the combat and movement. Others, like myself, have just gone for all the big out of bounds clips to save as much time as possible. Lots of ways you can approach this run, but
I would definitely recommend for newer players who are wanting to learn this game to definitely work on their combat, because combat is the quintessential ingredient to this speed run, and poor combat can definitely lose a good amount of time. Even more so than just wasting time on clips.
Enemy aerial unit destroyed. Reverting back to
Henny getting off a very clean A2.
Didn't I kill that
I don't think
already?
she ran away from him once, actually. So,
If it's that big, we
nice
should be
quick
able to see it.
A2. Probably keep focusing on Henny here until he gets to Grun Skip, because there's not real, or what am I saying? Grun Skip. Till he gets to Grun.
Grun
because
Skip?
there's not a
Wait,
whole
Six,
bunch-
do you know something that I don't know? Wait a minute. But it looks like Henny had a little bit of trouble there with some of the stubbies that spawn in front of the throne room. That can happen, especially when leaving the A2 arena, because the game doesn't necessarily know what to do when the player is back there, so the enemies really just sort of derp out and cause the transporter that we're trying to get through to just not want to cooperate.
We need you to find the emitter and take it out. Oh, is that all? I know, but it's the only way.
So nothing to really mention on Datto's screen here. It's mostly just a 15 to 20 minute shmup that began a little while ago. So for those of you who are just waking up, you might want to get a cup of coffee or some popcorn. I don't know.
Do something. There's not much else to see. I mean, you can continue to watch Henny. He's going to be going through the flooded skips, but then we'll be on a good Grun break where not much will be said. Question from Omer in the chat about the Japanese being faster. Japanese text was found to be slightly faster in RTA timing, just because we imagine because of locales, the loading time was sped up a little bit more. However, using Japanese voices does end up slowing down your run by about 30 seconds.
That is an interesting sort of phenomenon in that most of the loading cutscenes, like between transporter locations and during different parts of the game, the cutscene that, or quote-unquote cutscene, that plays is actually dependent on both the load time of the system, but also how much text is actually printed. So obviously in languages that have their script more compressed, like Japanese, it actually occupies less time than, say, some of the longer, more, I guess, thorough scripts like French or German or English. So in that respect, Japanese is actually quite fast. However, Japanese voices, on the other hand, sort of uncharacteristic like other games. You would think that Japanese voices would be faster, but at least in this game, because of sort of the emphasis that the voice actors really put into their lines, and good job on them, by the way, but unfortunately it does actually occupy more time than the English voices do, which is sort of an interesting phenomenon, because you would otherwise think it's the other way around.
Having trouble over there?
But at least in this game, Japanese voices are a little bit slower overall.
And as well with the Japanese text, since we do play on loadless timers, that it's kind of irrelevant now. A lot of the runners you see still using Japanese are just used to it pretty much at this point.
Or German, if you like
Or German,
memes.
yep.
Pascal's Dorf is the greatest meme in German.
So now both players on Grun. Datto is at the mortars, so I think he's one third into it.
I'll help aim.
It's either 1/3 or 1/2. I can't remember. I pretty much just black out during this section of the game, anyways.
2B, let's try for a more direct approach.
Direct? Oh, right.
That's right. Lay down some fire in its stupid mouth.
I guess you could consider it a third or so.
Now, I'll bring up what we brought up in every other commentary during this section, but we have put out an active bounty on finding a Grune skip. It's kind of a meme, kind of not. A lot of us are actually willing to pay money if somebody is able to find a way of skipping over this 15-minute auto, just pretty much
However,
just snooze fest,
Yeah.
essentially.
However, that is a bit of a tall order to ask as well, because our resident glitch hunter and game breaker Marky, as well as a good number of other people as well, who have attempted a sort of feat like Grune skip, have tried pretty much everything that they can. Unfortunately, this section is probably the most rock-solid section that we are aware of in this game that just does not want to give in terms of skipping it.
He has a plan. Just hold on.
That being said, the bounty is, I believe, up to $2,000 now, as of yesterday.
2B, I'm
But
going to see if we can use
again, like
some
Metherium
fast
said,
on the
it's a very rock-solid part of the game. A lot of the skips that we currently have are not in flight mode, as there's not really much we can do to get out of bounds or do any sort of skips like that. And then just the pure amount of phases that exist in Grune 2 would be a very hard skip to find.
It would, hypothetically, it would require something that entirely skips the entire section, because due to the intricacies of all of the triggers that are required in Grune, and sort of the auto-scroller nature of the entire section, it's rather difficult to go outside the box and really sort of break it apart. Oh, and Datto's getting a little bit of bad RNG on these core heads there. Oh no. So, unfortunately on these cores here, you have to defeat all... Oh my god. He's getting...
Oh
wow.
no.
So you have to defeat all 4 of those little cores before being able to damage the big core in the middle, and unfortunately, if the player isn't fast enough to kill the little cores on the ends there, sometimes the core just rotates the wrong way, or decides to rotate more than it usually does, and loses a pretty significant amount of time, as you saw on Datto's screen. Definitely up to the mercy of RNG on some of these cores if they decide to rotate the wrong way.
Now, ideally, you would be able to one cycle all the cores, but it is a pretty tight timing window. So if you're a little bit off on it, you immediately are susceptible to that bad RNG. All it takes is one missed core.
So just about getting to the end of Grune here for Datto. Getting a little bit late of a level up there midway in the shmup. But that's mostly because of the time that Datto took earlier in the run to get the spear. It caused him to lose out on some XP throughout the run, but hopefully he can make up that XP by the end of the run, he might end up being about a level or two under level when the final fight comes around. So 2B is now waking up on the flooded city shore. And likewise, we should all wake up, because action is about to take place. So it's worth pointing out here that Datto is jumping out into the middle of the ocean, essentially, and drowning in a relatively specific spot. That trigger there in order to trick the game that Datto is in another part of the flooded city to then get replaced. And that specific location is a little bit larger than most people think. But it is still rather precise.
And now we'll see Datto coming up the tunnel to one of the more precise skips in the game.
Yeah, speaking of precise.
The most precise, I'd say, on VC3 from what we've seen. It's a pretty tight lineup, especially if you're doing the controller. There is the alternative mouse and keyboard method. I personally use it. Oh
nice.
my, Datto getting it first
The
try.
swaggy spear clip. So ideally, the clip there, when using a short sword, what's known as a heavy hold, 2B is actually able to squeeze through a very precise angle in that wall. And another method of clipping out there was what we saw with how Datto used the spear, is by using one of the spear's light attacks.
What is this?
Oh, it looks like Datto's going all out in the swag here, going for a slippery plunge off of one of those rafters on one of the windowsills in the copied city. But under normal circumstances, that copied city clip is rather precise when using a short sword. So one of the remedies of getting a spear in the earlier in the run definitely makes that precise clip significantly easier. And now we're seeing Datto do a trick known as mansplaining. He's able to clip out of the arena when first encountering Adam. And because Adam's monologue is split up into different chunks of dialogue, by the time we actually get back to this elevator after clipping out of the arena, we're able to skip one of the longest blocks of dialogue that Adam is talking over at a specific time. Oh, that was really risky.
I know. Let's move.
So Datto was able to trigger a dialogue that's located within the elevator there and cause Adam to stop talking. And because that final dialogue block is over, the phase transitions into the next part of the fight. However, it is worth pointing out that him dashing fully into the elevator and dashing fully out of the elevator like that is very risky, because otherwise, if you get stuck in the elevator, the copied city deloads from the game, and when the game replaces the character back in front of Adam, like we saw, the arena would otherwise not be loaded in, thus making a soft lock. Or a pretty, I wouldn't really say a hard lock, but it's a significant time loss. So Henny crossing about the, I'd say 2/3 mark in Grun. One very clean execution on some of that dialogue skips there from Datto, moving very quickly. He finished talking with an enemy, talked with the computer girl, jumped into a dialogue trigger that causes Commander's dialogue to stop, and immediately Datto opted to talk with Devila and Popola to pick up some skill salves that he'll be needing in a later section of the run. So Datto was able to read the mail off of the transporter there, and now he's making his way
I need
to
know if you've
the
seen any new
factory
trends or behaviors among the machines.
and showcasing more spear dashing along the way.
Well, 2 days ago I was
And because there's enemies sort of pockmarked all over the place here, he's having to be careful on where he positions his camera, because this auto lock-on that 2B does is rather annoying
If that's what they
when
want, why don't they move
it
in?
happens to pull 2B off of the B line that Datto's trying to hit.
Apparently it's located in the abandoned factory. I can give you the
And
coordinates.
Datto actually on a very good pace this run. I think he's within 20 seconds of his PB, I want to say. No, he's a little bit behind that.
Location data
I'm just trying to
I
calculate
know
this.
in some streams that he was doing before this race, he was definitely very close to his PB and has been for a little while as well. He's a very consistent runner.
His PB, his next PB split coming up here would be for Mook's room, and the timer on that is 1:14:20. So I think it'll be a little bit close to that with all the amount of walking that we're about to see here. So he's definitely behind it.
Certainly does.
Unfortunately, Datto not opting to do the pantsuit strat on that slow walk, but a little bit of swag. We had a little bit of a connection issue with Henny's stream there. I'm not too sure what the cause of that was, but hopefully it will be okay for the rest of this. So Datto is essentially just waiting the 18 seconds or so it takes for this priest Mook to walk his tiny little legs over to the elevator, unfortunately. And Henny just finishing up with Core 3 in Groon, and it looks like Core 3 is giving him a little bit of an issue, but it should be okay.
So why are you still here?
Yep, there we go. Clean and finished. He'll be moving on to his copied city clip. We'll see how that goes for him. And then another couple of interesting clips coming up on Datto's part of the run. I imagine he'll probably... I'm not sure if he'll actually clear or skip Mooks here.
I think Datto opts to clear out Mook's room. I know some runners like to kill all the enemies in this room in order to have the fight progress, but others do actually opt to clip out of this room that Datto's in now and cause the enemies to essentially reset. And that has an interaction with the dialogue that is a lot more consistent than having to kill all of these enemies.
Less talk, more running. 2B to bunker.
So Datto not as close to his PB as I thought, about a minute off, but still, to be a minute off of PB in a race when you're a top 5 runner, that's a pretty good feat.
Group a distress signal.
Just goes to show for his consistency.
Damn it. 2B, the door on the other side of the room just opened. Let's check it out.
Oh, and it doesn't look like Henny's opting to go for copied city clip in this. I believe it's a little bit of a time loss to go around the outside of the cave and back in towards the elevator.
So we're actually seeing Datto. It looks like he's going for one of the old versions of 9S room clip.
It's funny because there's at least 7 to 10 different ways of clipping out in that room. Oh no, and it looks like Pascal was a little bit trolly there. Sometimes Pascal just decides to not get in the elevator, and he's very mean as a result.
But yeah, there is a lot of skips for 9S room. I'm still looking forward to seeing one of the top runners go and try and do the V1 clip. Just so many inputs and so interesting to watch. I can't even imagine doing it myself now.
I forget if version 1 is possible without
Keep moving.
a short sword. It might be possible with a spear.
So Datto having no problems with the Deep City Factory skips, or Deep Factory skips, Jesus. Hitting all of them first try except for 9S Room.
Oh, and it looks like Henny clipped out in mansplaining, but he's having some difficulty
Oh, and
trying to get the out
unfortunately,
of bounds on that. He did get the clip, but he clipped right back in bounds. Unfortunately, this block is a little bit slippier than you'd imagine, and the wall, the invisible wall, sometimes does not let you back in if you stray too far from the block.
fortunate. So now he's going to have to wait out the mansplaining dialogue behind that block there. See Datto moving on to starting Soshi now. He's going to stick himself up at the top of this bridge. You can pretty much just stick yourself in an infinite fall to wait out the timer for Soshi to start while you wait for 9S to turn off the power. It's just a quality of life thing. Why get attacked when you could just hang up here for free?
Yeah, pretty much. In the Soshi fight, when waiting for his force field to go down, it's basically just a music trigger. And you could either count out the time after 9S stops talking, or you can listen to the music for when it sort of crescendos into the rest of the music, which unfortunately I don't think I can hear very much of it, but honestly, my favorite, one of the favorite tracks that I really enjoyed casually even was in this fight, and how it lines up so well with the fight itself. Unfortunately, in the speedrun, we don't really hear too much of that, or rather too much of the rest of the soundtrack at that. And it looks like he's getting a little bit of the tail attack there. But overall, still a relatively good Soshi fight. Oh, Henny almost getting grabbed by Adam there. That was almost risky. But still an overall clean fight.
He is running a little bit behind PB here. But I think, I don't know how his runs have gone. I haven't seen his PB run since we seeded for the tournament. So I'm not too sure how smooth his Deep Factory is. But he's been having a pretty good run so far. He hits the dialogue skip. Very nice.
So definitely a lot smoother there. You could see Henny walking into that dialogue trigger that's just off the sort of tarp next to an enemy, and talking to Devil and Popola causes or results in him buying these skill salves. Those will be important, as we'll see in Datto's perspective much later on, or a little later on in the final fight.
No thanks.
Unfortunately, from Datto's perspective, the spear dashing is not exactly the most appealing thing to listen to, or rather watch, because of the flashing lights on the screen and the somewhat annoying screaming that 2E makes when doing so.
I'm not receiving.
And it looks like he's going to have to take a little bit of a break there on spear dashing because of those enemies spawned in front of him.
Let's move.
But this section of the game that Datto's in definitely saturates the city ruins with a lot of aggressive enemies. So it makes spear dashing very difficult if he wants to maintain it through some of these sections. So as you can see on Henny's screen, he's opting for a little bit of swag for the pantsuit strat. No shame. And on Datto's screen, you can see sort of the more annoying fight, at least for me and for most runners as well, having the 2D perspective in this fight makes some of the positioning rather easy when dealing with all these enemies, but is really dependent on where these enemies spawn in. Sometimes, as you can see there for Datto, some of those stubbies spawned in behind him, and unfortunately that's not exactly what we want. We want these enemies to be stacking up quite nicely, but sometimes those stubbies just spawn behind you, losing a little bit of time because they really mess up the positioning required in that fight. Going into Bokushi here.
See if he gets a nice attack pattern. Looks like so far he has. He is going to get the tail. Or, let's see what he gets. Oh, he actually just finished it. Let's see if he... Yep, he gets into the vacuum.
Bokushi there.
Very good Bokushi. He will get the SD off to get a little bit of extra experience. Now in Core 2, you want to bait it back over to this hill over here. Core 2, if you don't kill it quick enough, it will start flying up into the air, and then it's out of range of your damage glitch, which can be quite annoying. It can kill a lot of time, so to counteract it, we bring it over to the hill where we can still damage glitch it, even if it goes into its second attack phase.
I definitely struggle on that fight a lot, because trying to get Core 1 up onto that hill there, it's still rather difficult to get good damage glitches off on its actual inside body.
2B? 2B, can you hear me?
Because mostly its hitbox is very wonky.
Pascal? Come in, Pascal! Shit!
Oh, Datto having a little bit of complication there trying to spear dash, because it looks like he's only equipped the spear on one of his weapon sets. He was trying to spear dash, or perform the spear dash inputs on the wrong weapon set. But you can definitely see the benefits of spear dashing here in this long stretch of terrain that he has to cover to get to Pascal's village.
It seems the machines on the network have gone berserk. They've sealed off the entrance to the village and are trying to hold them off, but with these weapons, there's only so much.
And so we'll see Datto coming up here. He's going to use a technique with pod slow-mo. I don't know if we've explained pod slow-mo, but essentially when you use your pod program, it slows everything down around you in the world except for you. So you can use it to get in a couple extra damage glitch cycles off in between attacks. Core 2, it makes it very easy to zero cycle Core 2 if you can do a double damage glitch with the pod slow-mo.
I know Datto is one of the top runners who doesn't use slow-mo very often. That's one thing I've noticed in his gameplay in comparison to other top runners. Oof, and it looks like Henny is having a little bit of difficulty on Deep Factory skip there. He had managed to clip out in 9S's room, but was unable to void back up to the top room to perform the rest of the skip. It's still, this version of the skip that he's performing right now still manages to skip most of the Deep Factory, but he still has to run through the second set of Crushers, and he's having a little bit of difficulty here. He has to be careful on this explodey guy, but he still managed to make it through.
Oh, and unfortunately, Datto not getting the platform cycle skip. Fortunately, he did do a lot of damage to Eve, so Eve is going to drop off that top platform very quickly, but still an unfortunate loss of time.
The energy seems to be coming from a large number of linked machine life forms.
He's absorbing the life force of whatever's left on the network.
Damn it! We'll never get anywhere like this. I'm going to try hacking into Eve and shutting him down. Back me up, 2B.
On it. Protecting Unit 9F where he hacks the system.
Enemy unit
So
coming.
some good combat from Datto there, defeating Eve. Going into Eve's last two phases here. This is really a good example of good combat execution where trying to damage Eve when he's standing still like this is a huge bonus that runners can save a good amount of time on being able to deal with Eve's fast movement around this arena and dealing as much damage as possible by using melee attacks, pod fire, and lasers is definitely a skill to master, and is a rather difficult one as well, especially given the nature and fast paced of this fight. But it still looks like he got a good amount of damage on him.
Alert. NFCS destroyed. Close range combat no longer operable.
This is definitely one of those fights as well that those range defense buffs are paying off, because normally if you have Eve taunted at this point, 2 of those orbs hitting you will 2-shot you. At least with the defensive buffs, it'll take you down to about 10% HP, giving you a little bit of a window to top your pots off on.
Oh, and Datto just narrowly killing Eve there. It looked as if he was going to run out of one of his buffs the next time he would have buffed up, but fortunately,
It's okay.
strong to the finish.
I can always
That looks-
download my backup data from the bunker.
But you'll lose you, the you that exists at this very moment.
Guess so, but we can't.
Alright, so congratulations to Datto for winning this race. We're going to see Henny coming out of Deep Factory now. And a sub 130 time coming out from Datto. Very, very solid for a race. I think that might actually be one of the best times we've seen so far. And I'll just switch the audio here over to Henny's stream. Alright, and we're going to see Henny starting on Deep Factory Escape, getting into the lava here pretty good. Alright, and it appears Mytherium has dropped from the Discord, but that's okay. We'll finish commentating this one out. We'll have to see. I'm not 100% sure what Henny's PB is now. I think I want to say he's sub 140. So this will be a really close run. This last sort of boss section bit of the game takes about 9 to 10 minutes if you get it very, very smooth.
I see.
See if he can come out on top. I think he was a little bit behind PB coming out of Deep Factory. 142. Okay, then he's definitely within PB range. If he does everything smoothly, he should be pretty close coming up on Eve.
Let's move.
Oh, 140. Okay, yeah, then it is going to be pretty tight. 142 is definitely doable. 140 is going to be cutting it pretty close, but let's see what he can do.
Try contacting the bunker via laser relay system.
Affirmative.
No! Get out of here now!
It does seem like his splits are displaying that he's ahead of PB. We'll see if he can get a smooth resistance camp. Here, we'll see how quickly you can clear these mobs out. Ideally, you just want to keep spamming as hard as you can. Don't let the mobs that come in off the top fall behind you. He's going to want to stay buffed for this entire time here. Unfortunately, getting a little bit of a counterattack lift will lose him a little bit of time. And unfortunately, just getting a little too close to the stubbies on their wind-up, and so he's going to have to actually rebuff here to finish off the last sub-boss towards the end. Now we'll be off on our way to Bokushi.
To be. Huh? That. You again?
Alright, so hopefully he gets a good attack pattern. This one can be a little bit awkward, but if you can get the damage glitch going, the damage glitch will deal with all of the orbs that get shot out at you. Unfortunately, he's going to get the tail here. Does a very good job at dealing with it, hitting the iframes on his damage glitch to avoid it. Clears out Bokushi really quickly. Hopefully he gets the instant vacuum. Unfortunately not. Going to start vacuuming now. We'll see if he gets the SD off. Alright, come on, Henny.
2B, you okay?
I'm fine. Let's take this bastard down.
Right.
Alright, very quick core 1. Just have to wait here for this cutscene to core 2. He can get going by, I want to say 1:36. It'll be very, very tight. If you can get like a 2-minute, 45-second Eve, he'll be within that 1:40 time.
Pascal? Come in, Pascal!
Shit.
Now we'll see if he does implement the pod slow-mo and try to zero cycle core 2. It will be pretty important here to try and keep this PB time.
They're here!
9S! It seems the machines on the network have gone berserk. They've sealed off the entrance to the village and are trying to hold them off, but with these weapons, there's only so
Now the
much
one
they can
unfortunate thing to watch out for core 2 is if you don't get the zero cycle off, there's a chance that core 2 will fly over the fence next to you, and the core will land on top of the fence, not allowing you to damage glitch and finish it off. If that happens, then you have to wait for core 2 to pick up again. Oh, and unfortunately it looks like Henny's stream actually frozen out.
I think the unit presiding over them may have gone mad.
Looks like you got a pretty quick core 2 off.
Gotta be.
Not quite a zero cycle, but still relatively fast.
Most likely, yes.
Pod, I need you to locate Eve's current position.
Location has been detected and placed on map.
We'll take care of Eve.
You just worry about keeping the village safe, okay?
Do be careful.
Everything must die!
Alright, starting into Eve phase 1 here. Very slightly ahead of PB. If you can get a clean Eve here off, he should be able to get it. We'll see if he does. Hopefully he doesn't get platforms. Being very smooth so far with his damage glitch iframe timing window. And he does get these skip for platforms. Adam was just about to spawn them in.
Massive energy signature.
Just hits the threshold in time.
The energy seems to be coming from a large number of latent machine life forms.
He's absorbing the life force of whatever's left on the network.
Come on, you can do this, Henny.
Damn it! We'll never get anywhere like this. I'm going to try hacking into Eve and shutting him down. Back me up, 2B!
Slam, keep buffing up.
On it. Protecting Unit 9S while he hacks the system.
The enemy is connected to a vast network. Analysis. Enemy unit cut
Very
off from
nice.
network
Very quick
functionality.
phase 2. Going into phase 3 now. He's just going to try and have to keep as much going up as as much damage as possible. Probably get a couple melees in there and keep his buffs cycled. Make sure he keeps Adam taunted and then not die to anything. It'll be tough. Hopefully he gets good RNG on phase 4 to keep Adam close to him. Adam unfortunately not staying too still and flying pretty far away from him. Alright, Adam about to drop into phase 4 now. Unfortunately flying very, very far away. Now it's all up to the RNG. If Adam flies far away, it could kill a decent amount of time here. Stays close, he should get a pretty quick phase 4 here. This is looking like it's going to be a sub 140 PB. If he can finish this within the next 10 seconds, he should be well within the range. Very nice. He's going to get the cutscene. That should be a sub 140 PB. Congratulations, Henny. I'm pretty sure that's PB for you. Definitely a sub 140. Very respectable time.
I can always reload my backup data from the bunker.
But you'll lose you, the you that exists at this very moment.
Guess so, but we can't upload this corrupted data to the bunker. So...
9S.
There we go. 139.41. Congratulations to both the runners here. Datto coming through with a very, very clean run. Sub 130. Quite amazing for a tournament setting. And Henny coming through with a PB sub 140. Great race to watch in general. Good job to both of the runners. We'll see if we have either of them drop in for a post talk. So this adds now 6 PBs to the counter for PBs in this tournament. I think we've had, I want to say 8 races at this point, so there's been a PB just about every race, which is insane. Yeah, I'm not too sure where Myth went off to. He just kind of dropped out and went offline. So I'm imagining he's probably having internet issues. So we'll forgive him. I'm not too sure if anything is coming up on this channel immediately after. Let me just double check. Make sure we're not eating into anybody's time slots. If the runners want to come in here and do a post talk about the runs, feel free to. Okay, it looks like neither of the runners are coming in, and we are followed up immediately after by, I believe, Super Mario Odyssey, so I don't want to eat into their time slot too much, so I'll just do my thank yous now. Thank you for everyone in the Nier Automata speedrunning Discord, all the moderators, Canaris especially, for helping organize this tournament, and thank you for everyone at Speed Gaming to help host everything and keep everything running smoothly. We greatly appreciate everything. If anybody's looking to get into Nier Automata speedrunning, I highly recommend it. We have a pretty large active community of people willing to help, full of resources. You can check us out if you go to the URL discord.nearspeedrun.com. That should take you to the Discord where you can get information for everything else. All of our information as well is on speedrun.com. As well, feel free to follow the runners. Henny Health. Well, their commands are in the chat, so I'll just launch those both up. And yeah, have a good day, everybody.